Welcome back, learners. It's fantastic to have you here for another session of Global English Competitiveness. Today we're diving into the last part of this unit, 9D, how to critique an artwork. Grab your pen and paper as we journey deeper into the world of art. To recap, we have four can-do objectives in this unit. First, to describe one's reaction to a visual stimulus. Second, to interact informally to show interest. Third, to express opinions to justify one's choice. And fourth, to critique an art form. As you can remember, we have already covered our first three can-do objectives. You already described your reaction to visual stimulus. You also learned how to interact informally to show interest. And in the previous lesson, you learned how to express opinion to justify your choice. Now let's move on to our last can-do objective, to critique an art form. Without further ado, let's move over to our last lesson, Unit 9D, how to critique an artwork. And here are the sub-lessons that will help us achieve with our objective: reading, vocabulary, grammar, and writing. Paintings and sculptures are typical arts known by the masses. They come in different forms depending on the materials and the methods used. Let's read the lecture transcript on the two popularly known arts among the common populace. Lecture transcripts on painting and sculpture. This talk is primarily on the question of which art form is more popular to the masses. First of all, people's familiarity varies between two-dimensional art and three-dimensional art. Representing two-dimensional art is painting, and representing three-dimensional art is sculpture. Other forms may be popular too, but 6 out of 10 people you ask in the room will likely mention these when you ask them about art forms. So, our talk for today revolves around introducing the types of painting and sculpture. Different techniques at different times. This usually happens when artists rebel against standards. Art is a reflection of the ideals of the time, and art collectors seem to patronize the techniques together with the explanation how artists handle the materials, themes, and strokes. The first technique is realism, which details the edges the way the subject appears in real life. This is popular during the Industrial Revolution, where objects are portrayed as they are by defining the lines and strokes of the paint. Then, painterly technique gains popularity following realism. The artist using this technique manage color and consistency loosely. Next is the Impressionism period, where the strokes of the paints only illustrate how the objects impress the artist. Because of the object's unclear strokes and unusual strokes, the technique is a rebel against usual practices, with traditional artists labeling the technique as downright childish. After that period, the revolution against standards even became more intensified when artists used expressionism technique. The freedom to express the horrors and unpredictability of life is seen in the dreary figures, dark themes, and unusual colors. Next to that technique is the most controversial abstract art, where one can never see the object itself. However, in the recent times, art patrons tend to go back to a realistic depiction of the subjects, just like the way they appear in photographs. This technique is called photorealism. On the other hand, sculpture is also familiar to the masses. This time, we will just go a bit further and talk about the four types of sculptures, and the categorization relies on how the material is used. Relief sculpture appears two-dimensional as the back of the sculpted material is attached to another material, giving a protruding effect. Another is additive sculpture, where sculptors add materials to shape up a structure, for example, clay. Next is subtractive sculpture that requires the removal of material. Speaking from my perspective, this is by far the most perceived type of sculpture where sculptors use chisels and remove materials to form a design. Lastly, molding sculpture is made from a material that is melted down, usually a metal, that is then poured into a mold. That's the introductory part of our discussion on the most familiar art forms among masses. Now for our activity, read the lecture transcript. Tick which art form the techniques are categorized based in the lecture. For example, relief is a type of sculpture. Now pause the video and answer the rest of the items. Here are the correct answers. For our next activity, tell whether the following statements are true or false. For example, in number 1, the lecture is an answer to the question which artwork is popular to the masses. This statement is true. Now pause the video and answer items number 2 to 6. Here are the correct answers. Now let's continue with our vocabulary lesson. The reading article contains art terms and concepts. These terms are categorized as nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Nouns are naming words. They are the names of people, places, things, and ideas. Verbs are action words or the noun state of being. Adjectives are describing words. They're used to paint a picture of what the noun looks like, feels like, smells like, etc. Adverbs modify adjectives, verbs, and other adverbs. They're considered content words as the meaning of the sentence rely mostly on their composition. Now for our first vocabulary activity. Identify which words in the box are being defined. For example, blank refers to the usual practices. The word we're looking for is standard. Now pause the video and answer the rest of the items. Here are the correct answers. All right, moving on. Complete the sentences using the words in the box. For example, in number 1, metal is blank and cast into a mold to produce a desired figure. The word that we're looking for is melted. Now, pause the video and answer the rest of the items. Here are the correct answers. Now for our grammar focus, let's talk about reported speeches. Reported speeches are formed with introductory clause and that clause. Remember that the verb and time horizon in the that clause change depending on the context of the sentence. First, the direct speech. This is used when we use the same words enclosed in quotation marks. For example, John said, "The painting is reasonably priced for the material being used." Here we see the exact words uttered by John. Now for the indirect speech or reported speech, this is used when we report another person's speech and incorporate it within our main sentence. For example, John said that the painting was reasonably priced for the material being used. We have here another example. For the direct speech, we have here a conversation between Rika and Ted. And in the indirect speech, it becomes, Ted said that the painter is 77 years old. Here are more examples on how to report statements in present and future tense. For simple present, we say, I study fine arts. In the reported speech, it becomes, he said that he studied fine arts. Now, for the present continuous, I am studying fine arts. Then it becomes a reported speech. He said that he was studying fine arts. Notice how the verb changes. Now let's continue. Future tense. I will study fine arts. In the reported speech, we now use the word would. He said that he would study fine arts. And the last one, the use of going to. I am going to study fine arts. Now in the reported speech, it becomes, he said that he was going to study fine arts. Keep in mind that when we report that speech or change the direct speech into a reported speech, it changes. Now let's have some grammar practice. Arrange the phrases to form a sentence. For example, in number 1, the correct arrangement here is, he said that he practiced contemporary arts. Now pause the video and answer items number 2 to 6. Here are the correct answers. Moving on to our next activity. Write the reported speech of the given statements. For example, in number 1, we have here the direct speech. John said, the painting captures the events of the period vividly. Now, in the reported speech, it becomes, John said that the painting captured the events of the period vividly. Now pause the video and answer items number 2 to 6. Here are the correct answers. Now for our writing activities, still on reported speeches, answer the following questions by completing the answer statements based on the lecture transcript. For example, in number 1, what did the audience ask the lecturer? The answer here, the audience asked what art form was the most popular. Now pause the video and answer items number 2 to 6. Here are the correct answers. And we're down to our last activity. Let's first read the email messages between Linda and Clark. To Linda, subject, art critique. Hi Linda, please help me in my homework on art critique. What should I answer in the questions given if I choose the first wall art that you chose last time? Your friend, Clark. And here's the reply. To Clark, subject, my art critique. Hi Clark, here are my answers to the questions. Hope these can help. Your friend, Linda. All right, for this activity, write the number of the question inside the box where the answers are presented. For example, in number 1, what's going on in this artwork? The correct answer here is letter B. Hence, we write number 1 near letter B. Now pause the video and answer items number 2 to 7. Here are the correct answers. And we're down to our last activity. Select any artwork that sparks your interest and answer the following questions on your screen. After answering, you may use your preferred AI tool to check areas for improvement in your written output. And with that, we have covered our 4th can-do objective, which is to critique an art form. In this lesson, we read about painting and sculpture. We enriched your vocabulary with nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. We also discussed about reported speeches. And you wrote an essay on an artwork that sparked your interest. That concludes Unit 9D. Your active engagement has made our discussions both insightful and impactful. Thank you for joining us in Unit 9, The Way I View Art. As you continue to explore and interpret art, may you find inspiration and meaning in every brushstroke and composition. Remember, art has the power to evoke emotions, provoke thought, and spark creativity. We eagerly anticipate your participation in our future sessions as we continue to celebrate the diverse and transformative world of English competitiveness.